Is there a more fitting definition of absurdity than that very question itself? The one in which we, spiraling, a magnified speck upon another speck that has not yet realized that it, too, is floating upon a speck, asks for a description of why and what and where. Perhaps that's too strong a start. Sorry. Allow me to try again. Absurdity is... But now that word is too much, too sure of itself. Absurdity is not anything other than itself. Even then, does absurdity know its quantity? And of course that leaves intact the question of for what and... I'm doing it again, aren't I? Falling. I keep falling. It's this endless pit below me, my legs dangling into the thick ink of void, wetted, damp from their minuscule diving. If only it were truly minuscule. And then even here, as I try to describe to you this thing that keeps winding me into knots, yes, winding, not twisting, I'm falling and losing my sense of rational linearity. Suppose that is the only sane way to ingest this house. Absurdity is, and I promise I'll remain on track and not trip over that edge again, no matter how it looks up at me, eyes twinkling, only they are not eyes and they do not have any light to shine in their mirror coats. It's all imaginary. Mine, this attribution of substance that I keep giving back to the nothing. The nothing. All of it completely and utterly turned around to be backwards in the most forwards of ways. Absurd. I keep calling it nothing, a void, a bottomless pit that exceeds any ability I have to describe, and yet I do describe it. I'm doing it right now, describing it as a bottomless pit, as a void, and ink, and a twinkling eye, and a nothing. I think here that nothing has a body. Absurd as it is, I am able to define it. I see. I'd been ahead of myself. Is there a more fitting definition of absurdity than the act of defining it itself? To attempt, in some meager fashion, to give a body to the bodiless. A definition of absurdity. Yes. A sentence that is, by oath, a question and an answer. Hello. This is a video essay that I recorded quite some time ago, but never let see the light of day. It's been festering on my hard drive for months now. At this point, even I'm not quite sure what lies inside. I do, however, remember the journey of letting it go. There were a number of reasons, of course. I quite liked the idea, but unfortunately it just all felt like it was missing something. And added to that, I was growing increasingly tired and decided to move on to other projects. But then it lingered. Always behind and nagging at my typing hands. I've thought quite a lot about this video over the months. About remaking it. About simply giving up and uploading the original footage. About handing off the script to someone else with more time than I and hoping that they might be able to deliver what I'd intended. I've just thought about it. The whole thing. Or at least what I can remember. this video has haunted me for months. And so I'm here. What you just watched was the original introduction, and this here is my addendum. As I say, it's been quite a long time since I watched the video. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what to expect. Perhaps it truly is all rubbish and I was right to throw it away, but perhaps there's something worth salvaging. My hope is for the latter. I'm going to watch this video with you, so to say. And as I do so, I'll cut in with notes and afterthoughts that I feel are necessary. Perhaps in doing that, I'll be able to flesh this video out into something worthwhile, if that is what it requires. Oh, and I'll try to maintain my signature sapphic sapphire flair. I'd not dream of losing my dramatization. So, let us take each other's hands and step over the mantle to take up residence in a strange and moving house, to discover the bounds of what definition can be defined as, to fall endlessly whilst never moving a fraction from where we started. Let us discover, together, what frightens us the most. The dead or the people? Let's start more plainly. An anxiety that I think a lot of us struggle with is the idea of being wanted. For many, I would say that it is not so much the idea, but the need. How can I fit in with the others? What can I do to make them love me? Do I need to update my resume? Will I ever be enough, not just for work or friends or relationship, but every last thing that I feel myself needing to impress? We are creatures of impressions, in the sense that we allow these types of thoughts to occupy such large fragments of our brain. We need to, in order to survive, to breathe. What stands to reason, then, is that the word want has countless fears associated with it, though what I think is often ignored is the reverse of wanton fears. Not the fear that you aren't wanted, but the fear that you are. Why do they want me? What is it that they will do with me when they have me? How might I escape? For what reasons might I need to? Why does it feel like this house wants me inside of it? In this house, between the cracks, bricks, nails, screws, in this house, there is a sense of want. So it looks like I never actually mentioned what I'm talking about here. I keep calling back to this house as if it is some tangible thing and not an element of the book that this essay is discussing. That book being Mark Danielski's House of Leaves. In it, there is an exploration of 3 intersecting narratives. A fictional, found-footage film by the name of The Navidson Record, in which a man named Will Navidson succumbs to his new house that is impossibly bigger on the inside. An essay about this film by a character named Zampano, who is found dead in his apartment before he can publish the book. And a transcription by a character named Johnny Truant, who finds the book in Zampano's apartment shortly after his death. Very quickly, Johnny finds the book to have a much deeper impact on his life than he had expected, with many of his footnotes spiraling far beyond a simple interjection.
Did you ever find that? A house built by its own desires, where, in it, the walls shift not because of hallucination or some hidden mechanism or metaphor of claustrophobia, but rather because the walls are missing an inch of paint on the bottom. The shade is called want, and you look to be dipped in exactly that. Want. It is within such houses, where the layers of want seep through the cracks, that the other fear reigns supreme. To be wanted by flesh is one thing, but to be wanted by that which lacks the capacity to desire, to be wanted by a thing, that is true fear of intention. In this house, I feel a sense that the walls want me nearer, so they stretch infinitely away from me as if to say, keep walking. Even if I don't, even if I just stand here and look out along the endless hallway, or walk away and pretend that I do not want it, I'm stuck with this idea that I may still be giving in. Because where would that thought go? Tossed to the wayside? I think not. I know that even apart, even as I fight it with all my being, I'll remain consumed by that singular word that paints the every wall of this damned house. Perhaps it's not so foolish to enter the hallway then. After all, what could it change?
I know it's my style to entrench myself within a false narrative within these essays, but again, I'm failing to acknowledge what I'm actually talking about. The 5.5-minute hallway is a sequence of Danielski's book that sees Will Davidson explore an impossible stretch of his newly bought house. There, in the living room, appearing seemingly overnight right next to a window that shows the emptiness on the other side of the wall, is a doorway that stretches out into an impossible hallway. Near the end of House of Leaves, we get a glimpse of the found footage film in which Will Davidson enters said hallway. The place twists, it turns. The sequence is unnerving, to say the least. It looks like, well, it looks like this.
Often, when describing the abyss, we do so in a manner that extends it downward. A big pit that has no bottom is the usual image. Entering the abyss is a fall, or, as I like to describe it, sinking. The vacuous thing unfolds for the body and sucks you into it. No matter your velocity, the sinking is usually slow. Where a fall would merely describe the beginning of the journey, that tumble over the edge, and the ending, a splattering of sinew and meat on some unknown floor. Sinking describes the middle bits, where you understand that in this place you are nothing but what the abyss wants of you. And it wants you inside of it. The call of the void comes to mind. That feeling where, stood alongside the abyss, we as people feel this unnerving need to delve, knowing the fate that awaits us, but wanting to learn it in practice rather than theory. Of course, perhaps it is not so much that we know of our waiting fate, but rather that we do not. The abyss is an empty thing from the outside perspective, and yet on the edge we hear that call. Come to me. Dive in. I want you. And with that call, that contradiction of what we know to be rational, one finds himself pondering if, instead, we are merely lacking the knowledge we need in order to understand the void. So, we allow ourselves to sink in and in and in and in, forever, or at least for what ever remains. We become, inside of this structural void, the only built item in a body that was born.
Certainly, there are some spots which inevitably attach to themselves an atmosphere of holiness and goodness. It might not then be too fanciful to say that some houses are born bad. I've talked in a previous essay about how much I love this quote simply because of the word born. It describes Shirley Jackson's Hill House not just as a place that can be visited, but an inevitable thing that is living up on that hill. There is that old adage, if a tree falls down in the middle of the woods and no one is around to hear it, will it still make a sound? And Hill House does well to answer that question by asking, who says there ought to be someone when there can be something? I bring this up here because the house on Ash Tree Lane also feels, to me, as though it were born. Perhaps not at first. Perhaps there was a stage where this place was built by human hands. But eventually, the thing became far more than it was originally intended as, and, in essence, it was born anew. The 5.5-minute hallway is a living piece of film, narration, prose, whatever. These minutes describe to us a house that is aware of its occupants, and, with its twisting and impossible architecture, a house that wants that awareness to be known. There is a strong argument to be made that this section of the book can be viewed as a sort of awakening, both of the house and the occupants. Much like how Hill House's walls contract in response to those within it, we will soon learn that these halls do much the same.
Looping. The word likely comes to mind. A space that is the same space over and over ad infinitum. Like a sheet of paper folded over so that it may become a different size. Well, I don't think of this as looping, though that word back there is awfully apparent. Become. This is not a space that repeats, but rather a space that continuously becomes itself over and over again. It's some kind of game that the walls are playing, relaying themselves to you, to me, endless. I'm reminded, in these hallways, of a video game of all things. It's 2014. The PlayStation 4 is all the rage, and a strange new game appears on the store. It's free. Its name is an acronym for something no one knows. And like moths to a flame, we all start downloading and playing it. Much like here, there is little more than a hallway and some doors, all locked, save for the entry and the exit. A radio can be heard talking about stuff, but who cares what? Because thickening the air is the weight of that empty hallway. That house. It is a strange feeling to describe this place as a house, since it is so tight and lacks many of the usual components. But then I ask, what else is it? What else is it? The game, PT, or playable trailer, as we would later come to learn, was a horror experience unlike much of what was out at the time. It still lacked the farcical armaments of early survival horror, but then it wasn't so much like the run-and-hide horror games that had become so popular around it. In that hallway, there was this sense of survival, as though each time you passed through a loop, you had shed one layer of fear to reveal another. Yes, I suppose I have not mentioned that yet. The way that the game loops in on itself. There is never much more than that hallway. You enter and exit the same way each time, and with each run you always return to that same space. But it isn't just repeating. It's growing. The hallway changes as you walk, reconstructing itself in front of you time and time again, adding new horrors. A baby cries from the sink. A woman stalks you from the shadows. Sometimes the lights are out. Sometimes the lights are out. Many think of this game as the best horror experience of its time, maybe even all time. I'd have to agree. Though, I feel my reasoning may differ from the others. Sure, the bloody fetus and that ghoulish woman that haunts the halls made my skin crawl when I was young. The absence of light is unnerving. The general eerie atmosphere puts me on edge. All of the usual fear factors are there. But there's something else. The house. The game was removed from the PlayStation Store in 2015 after Konami announced the cancellation of the game it was advertising, Silent Hills. In fact, they announced that the game never even existed. So it's gone. None of those things in the hallways can get to me. I can boot up my PS4 and I'll be spared. I'm safe when I look for danger. I'm safe when I hold my controller. I'm safe. But then, I turn off the game system, my monitor. I put down the controller and turn around. I'm in a house. I am in a house. The door to my room is shut, and I'm not so sure it will open back to where I expect anymore.
An interesting thing to note here is the specific version of PT that is being used to capture the footage. As has already been stated, PT was removed from the PlayStation Store in 2015, and my PS4 does not still have the game downloaded to the hard drive. Thankfully, there are a number of fan remakes of the game available for download on the PC, with the specific version here being GZPT. a remake made entirely in Doom. Now, whilst this alone is an interesting concept, the choice to use this for the footage stands out, as House of Leaves brings to mind another Doom fan map, specifically myhouse.wad. The map, described by the creator as a lost map created by his recently deceased friend, is secretly an incredibly faithful recreation of Danielski's book. Though the narrative does differ a little bit, there are moments that are ripped directly from House of Leaves, notably the labyrinth that mirrors the 5.5-minute hallway, as well as the multiple expeditions that feature later in the book. It should also be said that when I originally recorded this footage, myhouse.wad was yet to release, and so the inclusion of it here is just an incredible coincidence.
And then I'm back there, at the entrance, the edge, looking forward and knowing, truly, that I am looking down into a pit that falls back beyond me. It is only during blinks that I feel I am truly free of the thing in front of me. That hallway. Endless. For in it, when I do blink, and my eyes shut for moments that could stretch into hours, days, years if I just held on, the air around me starts to feel warm.
Architecture comes into being only when observed. See also Don Lazzaro's A Vanishing New York, Ruins Across the Empire State, in which, during Thomas Mellon's foreword, architecture is said to be seen as a type of conversation conducted between generations, present and departed, reflecting who we have been and who we are now. Again, harkening back to that idea that architecture lives in the perception of others, and outside
Warmth in this place is an alien visitor, beamed down through darkness to invade what cannot be invaded, but only learning that when it is too late to turn back. This house. How could anything think to possess it after the fact? I don't. Not now. So what claim then does warmth have?
As if to imply, in a larger way, that there are some places in this world which no one will ever possess or inhabit. Again, I'm taken back to Hill House, specifically in this idea of possession and being possessed. Eleanor is a character defined by possession. In many ways, I think she reminds me of Anna from Andrei Zavosky's film of that very name, Possession, in that both of these characters are haunted not just by the supernatural nature of that word, but by the placid ownership it implies over the mind and body. With Nell's death at the end of the book, she removes any restraints she feels may have been placed upon her. Likewise, Hill House does well to establish that it too will not be possessed, that it is the owner of its own walls. Certainly she may become one with Hill House in the end, but it would be almost rude to suggest that the house is the one that took her life. In the end, it was Nell's decision, and now she and Hill House will be possessed by no one other than their own will.
Of course, that warmth is never long-lived, swallowed up by the opening of my eyes, and yet it is there for those few moments, and I cannot forget the touch of it on my skin. There is the thought of Shirley Jackson's Eleanor Vance in the halls of Hill House. Long after her death, does Theodora return, walking through that empty, cold place, shivering, frightened, feeling so much in this volatile body and thinking often that she ought to leave with haste, but for moments that are fleeting and yet feel like lifetimes, there is, for Theodora, warmth in Hill House. Her Nell, there, passing by as a spectral idea of what could have, and perhaps in Theodora's mind should have, been, then fading away into the cold and abrasive confines of that haunting place. Hill House. I shouldn't forget its name. I wonder if, in this moment, I am Eleanor or Theodora. Is this my home that I have come to die in, or have I returned to seek the warmth that I had known could never be mine? It's cold again, so who cares? Walking forward, on and on, as if nothing here is of any concern. The focus is only on the coming minute of film in which I walk forward, and the hallway keeps being just that, a hallway, growing, ever expanding into itself, but losing the sense that it ever was a self. Only it. The hallway, and, as a looming shadow behind it, like Lisa in PT, or the threat of the cold in the haunting of Hill House. Around this place, and refusing its name to be lost. This house. I am in it. Do not, cannot forget this house.
So, it doesn't come up here, but I did want to mention it. At the end of chapter 6, there is a brief discussion, if you can call it that, about the animals in the Davidson record. The Davidson family have pets in the book, though I can't quite remember what they are. A dog and a cat, perhaps? I'd check, only I feel the point comes across better if I don't. Because the specific topic of this discussion is that no one talks about the animals. All throughout the previous chapters, countless fictional resources have been cited which discuss at length the Davidson record, but notably few ever mention how the animals in the Davidson house do not seem to be affected by the inexplicable phenomenon. In fact, the fictional film doesn't seem to focus on these creatures often either. It is first pointed out by Zampano in his notes on the film, though he merely remarks that the animals are not being discussed. Johnny, in his footnotes, then points this out, only to ignore it himself in favour of a discussion about his own life. It's clear that much thought is being put toward the animals, and yet no words seem to be able to capture an understanding of what those thoughts feel like. It's not that the many whom have talked about the Davidson record are ignoring the animal thing. Rather, it's that when the topic comes up, everyone is trying, and failing, to turn their heads away.
And on that thought, I have this memory from when I was little. I was waiting for an ultrasound for a surgery, and there was a woman sitting next to me who had this machine in her eye. My memory tells me her entire eye was missing, and she had a camera that she had inserted into it. Though my rationality tells me that is likely an exaggeration. Regardless, I saw it briefly, and I was terrified of the hole in her face. Which, of course, I understand that was rash of me. At the time I was 4 years old and easily spooked. It was hardly the woman's fault that she had this machine. It was hardly her fault that the idea was immobilizing to me, and perhaps, presented with the same scenario now as an adult, I'd act different, but back then, small, afraid, looking, but not looking, never looking, how could I be? Then it was a hole, and a face, and a fear, and... Later, my mother tried to point the woman out to me, eventually even grabbing my head and trying to turn it for me. I was frozen. I knew what awaited me and couldn't bear to look. I couldn't even vocalize this to my mother. So I just didn't speak, didn't turn, didn't look, didn't know.
When I recount the story of my time spent in that room to friends these days, I don't even mention that lady. My friends know this story as the time I saw an adult man with an infant-sized left arm. Nobody knows about the woman sitting next to me. Not even me.
Haunting. That creeping feeling of behind. That is what it is. Not a paranormal experience or an inexplicable moment. Just something behind. Behind the making. Behind the walls. Behind that strange movement you swear that you saw but have no explanation for. Behind you. Behind you. It is as if, by turning around, the very concept of being haunted is lost to the wind. A revelation that is only absence, and yet, in that absence, becomes every answer that there could possibly be. Haunting is a shapeless thing, always behind, but so loud behind the curtains. In moments you'll know that it is there, but then do you? When the body of the thing is missing and even those farcical pieces you thought you had noticed earlier are all but gone, do you know of anything other than the idea that you might have? And perhaps that is too vague. The nature of haunting is to become as such. Vague. Missing. Hiding behind and hoping you'll never turn around. There's a film, the name of which eludes me.
Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Here. I've forgotten so much. In it, they discuss the nature of Orpheus and Eurydice's return from Hades. It's often that the word greed comes to mind when discussing this tale. The idea that Orpheus, knowing that turning and looking at his lover would return her to Hades, especially when so near the exit, would do exactly that and lose her forever, is betrayal to so many. But this film poses another option. Eurydice's agency in the matter. After all, is it so absurd to think that she too might have had a hand in her ultimate fate? Orpheus is specifically instructed by Hades to not turn and look at his lover, no matter what he hears. Those last 5 words are important. Orpheus makes it all the way to the end of their journey together, enduring the strange sounds coming from where Eurydice follows him, and the silence that comes after. Orpheus is strong. He traveled all the way to Hades, after all. So, propose there was a final sound that he heard, one in which he could not ignore because the origin of it was his lover's free will. Turn around, Eurydice might have said, and Orpheus did, because that is what his lover desired, a final chance at deciding her own fate. I've been looking at this room for hours now. I know what is behind me. I know what it wants. I know what happens when I turn around. So, I haven't. Not yet. I'm unsure if I ever will. I do not love this room. The sight of it unnerves me to my core. But what I think is far more frightful is the idea that I might surrender to the whim of another thing, give in to its order. I don't know if the hallway behind me is Orpheus or Hades in this analogy. I only know that I want it to lose me.
There's something to be said too about Eleanor and Theodora in regard to Orpheus and Eurydice, in that, at the end of the book, when Eleanor allows a final goodbye between her and Theodora, Theodora breaks down her walls and admits, if only slyly through the subtext of her meaning, the attraction she has garnered for the girl. But rather than blatantly reciprocate, Eleanor takes this moment similarly to Eurydice, as the turn around. It's a final glance at her lover before being cast back into the depths of Hades. Journeys end in lovers meeting. And certainly, this is the first time these two girls have met where they are admitting their love. And then the end, well, Nell's death would come only pages later. Something else that intrigues me is the inclusion of the word haunting, because this discussion is so apart from what that word usually centers on. Ghosts are surely what comes to mind first, though I'll ask you to consider the many pieces that come together in a haunting. Air so still, cold, aggressive, calming. No matter the nature, one's surroundings are inadvertently a part of the happening. Location is crucial. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the paranormal becomes an afterthought once one's surroundings truly expand their presence. Though perhaps that's far too ahead of the discussion at hand. I thought in writing this that it might be good to first discuss the specifics of what a haunting really is, and so I reached out to some friends of mine, in hopes that we might talk about exactly this.
Why don't we start off with an introduction?
Yeah, I'm a horror writer currently living in Maine, but I was born and raised in Utah, where I grew up Mormon, not anymore. I'm a mom and married, and we just moved here without ever having been here. So I'm just on this crazy new adventure right now.
So I'm Laurel Hightower. I'm a horror author. I've written Crossroads, which is grief horror, and Below, which is a Mothman take, and have a collection out. Every woman knows this, and pretty much no matter what I sit down to write, it ends up being horror and it ends up being feminist. So.
For kind of some backstory, when my dad was alive, he's been gone for about 9 years now. He had a group that he met for lunch every Wednesday called the Romeos, retired old men eating out. And there was one guy there in particular that I knew who worked at my junior high when I was a tween, I guess. And he never really made me feel very comfortable. So as an adult, when he would show up to these lunches with my dad's friends, it was always kind of weird. I always joined them, and he seemed to hijack the conversation with whatever was going on in his life and kind of just threw off the vibe that my dad had initially set up for the group. Yeah, about 5 years after my dad had passed, it was October 4th, and I was getting ready to go pick up some peanut butter bars that I had ordered at this restaurant that my dad used to meet his friends at for my sister's birthday. And I walk into the restaurant to get the peanut butter bars, and I see this guy that would always show up standing against the wall, and he looked terrible. And I didn't want to talk to him. I knew he would talk my ear off. I knew I'd be there for a long time. So I smiled at him, waited for my peanut butter bars, got them, left, smiled again, and it was just kind of weird. And then in November, about a month later, my mom called me. My great aunt had passed away, and she wanted to see if I could print the obituary. So I got online to get the obituary, and I found out that he had passed away. And so I felt horrible because I should have gone and said hi to him. I felt awful. So I texted the owner of the restaurant because he was a regular there, and so was I. And I said, "Hey, do you know what happened to him?" And she mentioned that he had taken his own life. That things in his life were just kind of a mess, and he ended things. And I noticed in the obituary it said he passed away September 15th. And I asked her, I was like, "Hey, is this a typo? Did they mean November 15th?" And she said, "No, he killed himself in September." And I said, "I saw him on October 4th in your restaurant." And it was so vivid seeing him in October, but she was very aware that he had passed in September, and it made so much sense the way he was standing against the wall and not sitting at the bar, the way he looked.
One of the ones that was oddest because it just didn't seem to be related, familial at all, or anybody that I'd had any particular contact with, was when I was a teenager, I think I was about 18, we had briefly lived in California. We moved back south. We are from Kentucky. We moved to Tennessee, and we moved to the top of this god awful mountain in Tennessee. And it was literally the top of a mountain. It was horrible. It was like a mile-long gravel driveway, and it was very, very isolated. And it was a fairly new construction. It was only about like 7 years old. It was just odd. I didn't get like much of a feeling from it when I was there, but it was all a whole lot of tumultuous stuff going on. My sister was also a teenager. She was starting high school out there and all kinds of stuff. So we were all kind of like not not speaking a whole lot. One of the things that kind of kept happening there was, so my window to my bedroom, where we didn't have any street lights, there was a big like security light that was right outside my window and would constantly shine in. But several times I would wake up and that light would be blocked by something. And it was like, the more I would look, cause I'm like sitting there kind of like looking and not wanting to move, and the image of it starts to resolve itself. Like, I could kind of see like a profile of what appeared to be a male standing over me. And, just the longer I would lay there, like the closer he would just like infinitesimally lean, until eventually he got close enough to where I would just kind of like, he was always standing between me and my lamp. And I would eventually like just freak out, jump out of bed and like turn the lamp on, and he would be gone. And, it's not that I didn't think about it a whole lot. I mean, at the time I was like, well, that sucks, like now this is going to happen tomorrow night. But it was kind of one of those things that I didn't really ever address with anybody. I was 18.
I used to work in downtown Ogden in Utah, which is a very old part of Utah, old for, American standards. Has a lot of history there with that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of hauntings, and my building was pretty haunted. And once other people got there and the place was bustling, I didn't have any issues. But being there alone in the morning, there was one particular spot where it almost sounded like you could hear jazz music in the morning, just in this one little spot of the office, which also it felt weird because the music was very faint, as if it was down a few levels, which would make sense because this building had additional layers since,
Oddly, this anecdote about music appearing in spaces that it shouldn't be able to reminds me most of Tsutomu Nihei's Blam. I think it might be best to go back to that quote from A Vanishing New York, ruins across the Empire State. Architecture is said to be seen as a type of conversation conducted between generations, present and departed, reflecting who we have been and who we are now. This idea of architecture, less as structural things and more as bleeding memories, is perfect. Blam is built around this very idea. The story is set in the script, I left out the word place, which, whilst I'll correct it here, it felt like quite a fitting slip for the discussion at hand. Place, known only as the city, a sprawling megastructure with no clear purpose or goal. You see, unlike the cities that we know, that are built by and for human beings, Blam City is built by machines called builders for, well, the builders constantly add to the city, leaving grandiose architecture wherever they go, but they lack any reason for doing so. Blam City is built by machines with only a distant memory of why they are building. One of the most notable images from the manga is that of a set of barely stairs, lining a wall and leading to nowhere. I love it. In fact, my novella, Our Witchless Flesh, is based around this very idea of stairs without an understanding of why. But here, in this essay, I want to narrow in on something else. The archways. This image is far quieter. They appear so frequently that you'll probably never notice them until you're standing right underneath, looking up. What are these for? Archways are so often doorways or windows, a passage through which to move. But these, they feel stagnant, like traps. I can see the other side, and yet I'm not completely convinced that I'll be able to make it right through. The meaningless stairs certainly fill me with a dread that asks, what worth do I have in a world that will forget me? But the archways, they taunt me. Tease the thought that the world won't forget me, but it will do everything it can to make me feel gone. It's quite pertinent to something Laurel Hightower said in her interview.
There was an odd thing with the room that I was in, that I was on the top floor and it was like right under the roof, and there was this weird little room, this tiny door that opened off my room onto what appeared to be just like a regular like storage space. But it was a weird place. It was the sort of thing you would find in like a really old house, and this was new construction. And I didn't like that door, so I just never opened it and I didn't put anything in there. But in a way, I think I kind of associated with that, that figure with that. Or there was no way I was not gonna go check it out, And so I was thinking about kind of trying to do something in there, but the longer I was in there, the more uncomfortable I felt with it. It felt like I didn't understand the intention of it.
Intention is such a loud word here, and I love how unintentional it was.
It's very interesting to me that you use the word intention, because that sort of implies, we can look at that as like, what did the architect intend or what did the builder intend? But being in a room and thinking, what is the intention of this? For me, it almost asks, why is the house doing this? Why has this appeared here?
The only other time that I remember encountering something that felt kind of malevolent like that, this very old building had been split up into these condos, and my mom was thinking about buying a condo, and I wasn't living with her at the time, but she wanted me to just come see what I thought about it. And I looked around it. I remember it was this place called the Nicholas. It was really cool looking. I was like, wow, it'd be super sweet to live here. But there were some of just the darkest spots in that place, like this weird spot in the kitchen in this sort of open under a counter, which I think was where she was going to put the dog bowls. And it was like almost this like black void. And there was a back staircase that led down to it was, I guess, the internal access to the condos. And I was like, Mike, you might as well that feels like a portal to hell. She came back another time. She brought the dogs, and they hated it. They would not, so for whatever validation, I'm going to take validation from the golden retriever, but they had a feeling there too. And my concern at that point for it wasn't so much that I felt like anything was going to come showing up and hang my sister or, cause a lot of physical damage. But I feel like the bigger concern in those instances is how they can emotionally affect you.
I think banal is a word that is too often overlooked in regard to haunting. Because so often it is far more plain than you expect it to be. Sure, there are volatile moments during a haunting that will ruin you at the core, but it's the moments in between that are most terrifying. The Haunting of Hill House would go into this. An entire chapter after the first haunting sees all 4 characters simply living their life in Hill House. All is quiet, all is plain. Everyone is behaving as if only hours prior they'd not experienced the truest of fears. And you know what? It's terrifying. The quiet afterthought of fear shook me to my core. All I wanted was for one of these characters to delve into a page of inner monologue about how terrifying the previous night was, and yet nothing. Just move on. Just keep living. Perhaps the reason I found this so terrifying was, well, because of how real the depiction of haunting was. The relation I felt to that immobilization because I've known haunting. I've known it well. For 5 years, I lived in a house that was most certainly haunted. I could tell endless stories. The time I awoke to my bedsheets being pulled from my body, screaming in the room. The countless times my mother and I heard loud voices in our bedrooms. The figures I'd see. There was an occurrence that shook me to my core. It's 2 a.m. and like most nights in that house, I couldn't sleep. I hear footsteps moving from the front door through to the kitchen. And I'm just lying there, listening to each step, thumping. These were proper floorboards, so any movement in the house was so deeply felt. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Of course I could have, but I refused to, but for the fear that I might be heard by. And so I'm still just lying there. And then I hear the pantry door open wide and then shut. And then again. And then again. And then again. And then again. For every hour, every minute, every second. Open, then shut. But then what of the banal? Surely I won't describe this all as plain. No, I won't. But what I will describe as such are the moments immediately after. The pantry door eventually stopped opening. 3 o'clock on the dot. I lay there listening to it for the entire hour. It's the afterwards that I remember the most. I didn't lay there waiting for it to start again, nor did I think I was in any danger after. I just went to sleep. And the next day I woke up and had breakfast in that same place that had haunted me the night prior. I didn't leave. I couldn't. I was in that house. I was in that house. Oh, how I despise this house. I thought we might take a moment to talk more about Blam. Whilst I have quite clearly latched on to the architectural horror elements of the book, that narrative happens more in the background of the main plot. Blam keeps trying to convince you that it is some kind of sci-fi action book, with a techno-mystery and epic fight scenes littering the pages. What I noticed in these moments, however, was the way that Nihei zooms out. Constantly, fight scenes are undercut by these wide shots of the space around, shrinking down the brawling characters into nothing more than specks. It's a reminder of the banality that life has been given in the city. No matter the intensity of a battle, no matter the passion it is fought with, nothing could really matter in the grand scheme of the city. You might even say,
It doesn't care. About me is an afterthought. It does not care. This house. I've been banging my fists against the walls for hours now, painting with my ink, the red kind that I usually hide. I think my blood has seeped so far in that my mortality has become the mortar holding together the bricks. But the house does not think this, does not try. It doesn't care. I see leaking blood, and the house sees nothing. Just walls and walls and walls and... Yesterday I walked for 2 minutes. My body screamed like it had been in age. The place stood still as if I hadn't moved at all. I only ever moved forward, as though there were some goal to reach, a toward. There is nothing. It doesn't care. The only thing, other than myself and house, is what has been behind me since I discovered it last week. That room. The one I stared at and stared at and stared at. I think, as I stand in front of that room and refuse to remove my back from its view of that woman with the missing eye. Why won't I leave the room behind? I cannot bear to look at it any longer, and yet I won't let it stop looking at me. It doesn't care. But I do.
Hi, sorry for interrupting. I don't know what this is. I don't know what... I don't know what this room is. I don't know really what I'm referring to. I've been looking for it in the script, in both the original script and my current script, and I don't see it. I don't know. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this footage is. I haven't known what any of it is the whole time, really. I thought it might become more clear. it doesn't even really relate back to any specific moment in House of Leaves. Like maybe exploration number 5, but that's a bit of a stretch. Yeah, I'm confused. I'm lost. It feels relevant, so I'll keep it in, but I don't know what this is. I'm really lost.
There is a handprint on the floor written in blood. Mine? I spent my bloody time banging on the walls. How might this one have crawled down here? The size doesn't match. This is just a hand. Why? The answer wouldn't change that it is here. It just is. A hand, not mine, in the hallways that are also not mine but certainly contain me. Is this the house pretending to care, only that it doesn't quite understand how to? I remember reading Blam and being struck by a line on page 174, but we've long forgotten what the words on our retinal displays mean.
Again, I don't know what the fuck is going on. It's like she's referencing my parts in the essay, but this is months old footage. I hadn't even read Blam at that point. I looked at the pictures, it influenced my book, but like quotes and shit, this isn't in the script. This isn't anything. This is just, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what this is.
Imagine that. Digital eyes with prints plaguing your vision, but you don't know what they mean, or why they mean. They just are, and, over time, you stop caring. Probably stop looking even. There's been a word written at the bottom of the screen since the video started. You probably don't understand it yet. You probably stopped caring some time ago. But it's there. It will continue being there, won't it? I didn't put it there, mind you, but I saw it just as you did. I never have deciphered the meaning. To what? Maybe you will. Me? I am in the house, occupied by poisons, exploring elsewhere, walking into. My back is still turned on that room and on that woman, just like they turned their back on that dark tower.
I'm still a bit unsure of this segment. If I might break away from the essay for a moment, it's now been a couple of weeks since I touched it. The appearance of the present in the past was I spent some time away from everything. A walk through a city seemed a decent escape. Out of it. Out of a house. So I flew out somewhere new. A place whose structures are unfamiliar. Away from me and my normalcy. Call it meditation, if you will. I certainly won't. Even there, in that place, devoid of that 5-letter word I cannot continue to utter. I'm between walls. walls. I don't know really how to convey what I mean by this. Perhaps it is all too personal. But there, in the city, where structures reign supreme, it was as if they were winking at me. During my visit, I came to notice the sly cheek of the built, the way that each structure continues to stand regardless of anything around. And they aren't even proud, just there, among the pieces of the usually mundane, together and so apart. I'm back, when thinking about these buildings, with that thought I had earlier. The world won't forget me, but it will do everything that it can to make me feel gone. People are able to appear and vanish without so much as an afterthought. Decades of a life can take place and fade away without leaving any dent on the world. But the built? Structures are the dent on the land. For those things to be created, something must first be destroyed in their place. Structures cannot exist without first creating a dent. They do not need us. They do not care for us. I left quite soon. But the return met me with those buildings again, just like they turned their back on that dark tower. This could be about anything. The tower appears so often, and even one who is ignored doesn't narrow much. Annihilation has a tower in such a state, and certainly a mention of that particular tower is fitting in this essay. Likewise, there is a tower in The Haunting of Hill House. With how much we have both mentioned that book, I wouldn't see it unfit here. I don't think of that tower, though. A vanishing New York, ruins across the Empire State's most striking page, in my opinion, happens so early in the book that turning to see the rest of the pages is nearly impossible. The tower juts out like nothing else. An almost empty page occupied by a thing described as a water tower. To think that this aggressive structure was a life source for a hospital. Unsettling barely registers with meaning. It stands there in its field, meaning lost but bricks still in place. I imagine you'd see the tower long before approaching it, and more startlingly, it would likely see you long before you saw it. Why this contraption of life needed to be designed the way it is beyond me. Water tower? Then why does it poise itself like a damn turret on the front lines? And for what enemy? Perhaps there is no enemy. Just a threat placed into a vessel that doesn't know the meaning of the word. I cannot stop thinking about what Laurel Hightower said about the door. I feel like I don't understand its intention. This tower. This house. This house. I don't understand this house. Do you know what I was thinking about whilst I stood in that city? I thought about the tower, how it might peek out over the skyline and look down at me. I wonder if I would have seen it, and, in that thought, I wonder then if it was there all along, watching me. Perhaps if I had seen it, I'd still be there, just like when I met it in the book. Unable to turn the page, unable to finish reading. Even when I did move off of the page, when I inevitably turned my back on the tower and let my eyes digest the remaining structures in the book, it was there, behind me and in front of me. I turned my back on the tower, but it never turned its back on me. Anyway, this is where this tape ends. Exploration number 1. With no reason or goal. I feel as though I'm losing this essay with each passing chapter.
Forward no longer means anything. Moving, leaping, running. A sprint into the abyss that never becomes a fall. I am floating, suspended on the ground, perched, looking. The hallway refuses me, yet it won't release my body. I am in it, and with that, I am unable. Is able a word that means anything now? In the darkness, in the cold. I've wondered for some time now if my frozen movement is born of that cold. Ice forming around my muscles and refusing my descent into this house. What business ice has with the mechanisms of the build is beyond me. Perhaps the cold, too, is trapped in this place. Both of us victims to a greater will. Well, it does not quite seem that this place has a will. It only has. And the object of that remark is not nearly as important as the motion of having. Can I even say that I am in it? Or am I just here? And here, in this context, is less a physical place and more an abstract decision by my feet and the thing cradling them from below. Here. And for that matter, is the thought of why relevant? Certainly that syllable has not danced through my lips in some time now. Who cares? The house does not, so why should I? In this solitary place there has been given no reason or underlying intention. Only frozen movement, only me, only the walls, only... cold. Last week I think I wanted the motion to come back, the forward, the deeper delving into these weird halls. I do not know of the word want today. Only forward, and not. Only here.
On the plane ride to that city, I read through Neil Gaiman's Coraline. The idea of moving forward is so pertinent to that story. And to me, in that state, on that plane, moving towards something. Of course, I was always in that plane, so the actual movement was beyond me, but I was moving. I arrived after all, so who am I to argue? Coraline, at its core, is a story about an inability to move forward. Coraline's parents are consumed by the mundane pieces of life, work, chores, the building of proper routine, and in that they forget the daughter they are doing it all for, so they are frozen, creating the mechanism for moving, but forgetting the fuel. And then there's Coraline, succumbing to a fanciful reality that preys upon her desire for exploration. Coraline is, by definition, moving forward, but then the place that she is moving toward is the place that she thought to be escaping, so is she? Is this truly forward? I think of Coraline in the other house with the other family as stagnant. An attempt to run away only to arrive back where you started. Perhaps the most explicit display of this very thing is when Coraline goes running into the other woods, only to arrive back at the other house she had thought to be escaping. Even in the end of the book, to truly escape this world that she and her family have remained frozen in for so long. And I do think that the image of the snow globe is absolutely intentional. Coraline needs to return to the other house in order to rescue her parents. This after she has thought herself to escape. This after she has so clearly decided she does not want to return to the other house. In the end, Coraline needs to move backwards towards what she does not want to. And this, at last, allows that idea of forward to return.
The real kicker is that I've been moving forward for several hours now. But I no longer care enough to notice.
The following 2 chapters contain no additional dialogue. Oddly, it's just footage of those hallways and walking. I thought to exclude it altogether, but well, then I started watching. And I couldn't look away. I might interject with thoughts that I have about this here and there, but for the most part, I'm just going to let these clips play out as they are.
That's my offer. That's my fucking offer. But that's not how... The door leads elsewhere in the house. Not there. That's my fucking office. That's my office. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. Here I am. It should not be here. I should not be here. But I am. In this house. The hallway doesn't seem so long, but I know that is merely an illusion. A turn of the corner and it stretches infinitely onward. The whole time I'm here, I keep thinking that my office is right behind me, but I've been walking away from it. Into this abyss. It's true that walking through these doorways feels as though falling into a pit, each one newly dug, deeper than the last. And when I find myself in them, I don't know that I want to climb out. Also here is the feeling of climbing. Do you understand what I mean when I say that my falling down also feels like climbing upwards? Suppose you'll suggest I use the word through, but I'd object. This is more than moving through, tunneling. No, this is a climbing fall, a descending ascent, up and out, over and under, in. It's the only word that really means anything in here. Now if you'll excuse me, I'd like to explore this next room alone. In one of those rooms, not unlike the other ones I found, there is a chair and a desk, a place upon which I might finally rest. Built things that are, at last, for me, and not against me. I've been sitting in that chair, taking comfort in its embrace. I don't know that I'd long to be held whilst wandering these halls, but to find that idea in an object of all things. I suppose it's only fitting that the built now becomes my companion. Am I domesticating the house? Could I even? Is that what it is when we take bricks and mortar and slather them upon each other and layer them upward and build and build and build? To think a structure would even let itself be domesticated is absurd. Look at that city in Blam. Only the people are caged and bound. The walls are free. The walls aren't envious of anything. They stand. They might fall. They do not care regardless.
In here is so fresh. It would be so easy to mention the womb. This is not that. No rebirth. This is a building after all. So reconstruction? Is that what is happening to me? No, is happening at all relevant? No, I imagine not. I'm still thinking about my office, standing back behind me. Behind is such a funny thing, relevant only now when it is said and never again. Not to think of a haunting as something behind. Well, then does that dismantle the pieces that left a ghost intact? A ghost. A ghost would be so easy. But bricks, wood, nails, how do you escape it? The shell. I am the only ghost in this place. Does that make me the haunter? There was a mention in one of the interviews. I don't remember whose, and I don't care anyway.
I feel like anytime I've been depressed or been going through the throes of grief or dealt with postpartum depression, it's very easy to, oh, well, that's why. You know, your brain's not all there. When really I feel like those emotional depths are what connect us to everything more deeply. And so I feel like with Haunting of Hill House, the fact that grief was such a huge theme, I would totally agree with you that maybe there are really no ghosts in the movie, that energy was just so heavy that was really the ripple effect.
What we bring, our energy, as though we are batteries for the astounding experience in this casing around us. The house becomes electric at our touch. So many people think they fear the ghost, that thing in the room with them. But me, I fear that room that contains us both. It was the house I couldn't bear to be in when I was haunted all those years ago. It was the tower I couldn't remove my eyes from as I walked through that city. Did I tell you I saw it again? I went back. Needed to. And there on the skyline was that fucking tower, laughing at me. I think there I finally understood the joke and laughed back with it. The thing likely doesn't care. Probably never intended any kind of humor. But I laughed all the same. I didn't remove it from my life either. Only this has done that. This exploration. This house. Even next to that lady with the missing eye, do you really think that I feared her? No. It was the hole, the mechanism that occupied it. It was the built pieces that I could not bear to know. The flesh might find ways to horrify, but the built is innately designed to jump through where it was never intended. Like me. In here.
Eventually, I found myself bored. Can you imagine that? After so long walking and being trapped. Boredom. So, sitting here, I look around the room and see, almost as though it is looking back at me, a book. House of Leaves. It's heavy in my hands, but so warm, as though its pages were taken from a pile of burning paper, pasted back together, and then scribbled on. Do you understand me when I say that the book, more so than usual, feels like it has been constructed? I hope you will. Craving the warmth, I open the first page. Its countless words assault my eyes, and so I turn to the second, the 3rd, the 14th, the 153rd. On and on. I read the pages, eyes as close to the ink as I can bear, sucking up each drop of warmth, leaving the book cold as I tear through it. Hours pass, days maybe. Who am I to say? The room lets no illusion of time through save for the cooling of the pages in the book. But soon, the book is spent for warmth, and I'm just flesh in a house again, craving, cold, lost. I thought for a moment, like Navidson, that I might burn the book and keep warm a little longer. But what would that achieve? Momentary bliss? I've no need for such a thing anymore.
Surprise! There it is. The big secret thing that was mine and now it's yours too. We can have it together in this place. And maybe in that declaration we can build a new idea of what it means to own. Because I crave that more than anything now. The thought that I might own something. The thought that I might become, as the house has, an owner. A thing with possession and conviction, because right now, what the fuck am I? Huh? What am I in this place of bricks and wood and built things that I just want to leave behind? But I can't. It isn't keeping me here. I just won't leave. I even know the way out. I found it just before. What does it matter? This place continues to exist and I continue to know it, so even outside, am I really there if this fucking house is still festering inside me and chewing on my inner pieces? What peace can I ever know? I'd leave and the house would be behind me. I am not Eurydice, nor am I Orpheus. I'm not even Hades. I'm the hellish dirt they walked upon. A meager afterthought that has to be there for the story to unfold, but is never given any notice or praise for carrying the tragedy. I cannot leave this place. It cannot leave me. And so we are together. Forever behind each other, forever laughing and spitting in each other's mouths and sucking on that saline flavor as if we care for banal things such as taste, but we don't. And we both know it, shout it, scream it in the face, so why the fuck can neither of us refuse? The charade. Why the fuck am I still in this house? It's only me. Here and amongst the mechanisms. I'm a broken cog that won't stop turning. My teeth do nothing to activate the machine. Either I don't recognize how meaningless I've become, or I simply refuse to allow that as the truth. Gods. No. They aren't of any substance now. Fuck. Fuck!
cannot leave this house. For having learnt of it, I am forever haunted.
Forever, that tiny worm will rot in both your brain and the wood of the walls surrounding. An idea, a word, haunting and its constituents. It's tricky to think of not being in after the fact. Something mentioned in the Stradivarius Claustrophobia Incarnate is Hill House and its incredibly tight walls. This is an element that is so often lost in live-action adaptations, where the place becomes a large, open mansion ripe with possibilities to scare. Only in the book do the walls remain close to those within, teasing the flesh with the idea of touching. What isn't mentioned in that previous video essay, however, is the fact that they never do touch. Just tease. Over and over again. Together, these pieces, the flesh and the built, dance a dance whose moves are shimmers. It is during this performance that one utters the word ghost, giving phantom bodies to the innate fear of the house. To think, once again, of the animals and that avoidance, or, in the case of this particular essay, of the lady whose eye was missing, there is something to be said for how forgotten the house becomes. Of course, forgotten is merely a placeholder word, for the true happening here is that the built is being deliberately ignored. No one mentions the animals, or the archways, or the brutality of the tower, just as no one mentions the house. Something terrible went bump in the night, and it is far more digestible to create a phantom specter than it is to suggest that the house, your refuge, the thing built only to serve your purpose, has intent to harm you. Perhaps there are truly ghosts that creep through our structural passages, and certainly we might continue to deliver evidence of that fact. But concretely existing without a need for reason, between us and around us, forever planted within the garden of unease, are the houses that are haunted, and, more terribly, irresistible. Impossible to rationalize, but so astutely understood when standing within, is the fear of the houses that themselves seem to haunt us.